The mountain did not welcome anyone. It never had. Its peaks were jagged and indifferent, its tree line thick with pine and shadow, its roads, if you could call them that, little more than suggestions carved into frozen earth. In November, the clouds came low and stayed low, pressing down on the ridgeline like a hand over a mouth. No birdsong, no wind, just the deep, breathing silence of a place that had decided, long ago, that people were temporary. Elias Cord drove up that mountain like a man who had already said goodbye to everything below it. His truck was old. A '94 Ford, gray where it wasn't rust, quiet where it wasn't rattling. The bed was loaded with lumber, a toolbox, 2 bags of groceries, and a single duffel that held everything he still considered worth keeping. He didn't listen to the radio. He didn't check his phone. He watched the road the way a soldier watches a tree line, not with fear, but with the particular alertness of someone who has learned that stillness can lie. The cabin appeared through the trees like a confession. It sat on a flat shelf of land just below the eastern ridge, small and square and sagging, its porch half-collapsed, its roof patched with mismatched shingles, its single window facing west like a blind eye catching the last of the autumn light. The real estate listing had called it a rustic retreat with character. Elias had called it perfect. A place that needed too much work to leave room for thinking about anything else. He cut the engine, sat for a moment, let the silence come in. Then he got out, pulled on his gloves, and got to work. There is a particular kind of man who speaks through his hands. Elias was that kind. He didn't explain himself. He didn't justify. He measured twice, cut once, and when something was broken, he fixed it. Not because he believed in restoration exactly, but because idle hands had become dangerous to him. Somewhere in the last 3 years, stillness had curdled into something he couldn't name and didn't want to. So he stayed moving. He stayed useful. He stayed away from people who might ask him how he was doing and actually mean it. The first week on the mountain, he relaid the porch boards, rehung the front door, patched the roof over the bedroom, and rerouted the wood stove flue so the cabin would stop filling with smoke every time he lit a fire. He cooked simple things, eggs, rice, canned soup, and ate them at the small table by the window without looking at anything in particular. He slept early and woke before dawn and did not dream, or if he did, he didn't remember. On the 4th night, he found the photograph. It had slipped behind a drawer in the old pine dresser, left by a previous owner, maybe, or maybe by the cabin itself, the way old places sometimes surface the things you carry without knowing. It was a picture of a woman and a little boy, laughing at something outside the frame. Elias stood there holding it for a long time. Then he set it face down on the dresser and went back to work. The ring on his left hand caught the lantern light as he hammered. He didn't take it off. He hadn't taken it off in 3 years. He wasn't sure whether that made him faithful or foolish, and on most days he decided it didn't matter. There was no one left to ask. The knock came on a Thursday. He almost missed it. Just a sound beneath the sound of the wind picking up outside, soft as a branch brushing glass. He paused, hammer in hand, and listened. Silence. He went back to work. Then it came again. 3 knocks, slow and careful, like someone trying not to disturb him, like someone who understood they had no right to ask for anything but was asking anyway. Elias set the hammer down. He crossed to the door and opened it. She was standing in the rain, and it was raining now, a thin, cutting rain that came sideways off the ridge. Wrapped in a coat 2 sizes too large, her dark hair plastered flat against her face. One hand braced against the door frame and the other pressed flat against the enormous curve of her stomach. She was young, late 20s maybe. Her eyes were brown and steady and exhausted in the way that goes beyond sleep, the way that comes from carrying fear for too long without anywhere to set it down. She looked at him. He looked at her. She said, "Please." Just the one word. No name. No explanation. No performance of desperation. Just the bare fact of it, offered plainly, like something she had already decided she wasn't ashamed of. Elias stepped back from the door. He gave her the chair by the stove and boiled water for tea he wasn't sure she wanted. She sat with both hands on her belly, watching him move around the small space with the careful eyes of someone cataloging exits. He noticed. He didn't say anything about it. She didn't offer a name. He didn't ask for one. What he did ask, once, quietly, while he handed her the mug, "Are you hurt?" She shook her head, then stopped, then said, "Not the way you mean." He sat across from her and drank his own tea and let the silence do what it needed to do. Outside, the rain thickened. The temperature was dropping. He could feel it in the way the cabin's old bones creaked and contracted, the way the fire worked harder to hold the cold back. She flinched when a log shifted in the stove. It wasn't a big flinch. Most people wouldn't have caught it. But Elias had spent enough time watching people to know the difference between surprise and reflex, between someone startled by a sound and someone who had learned to brace for what sounds sometimes meant. Her wrists, where her coat sleeves had ridden up, were thin. One of them had an old bruise, yellowed at the edges, the kind that was nearly gone but not quite. He looked away before she noticed him looking. That night, she slept in the bed. He insisted, she resisted. He won by simply making up the bed and leaving the room. He slept on the floor beside the stove, back against the wall, listening to the rain turn to sleet against the roof. He did not sleep well. He hadn't slept well in years. But there was something different about the sleeplessness tonight. Less like drowning, more like keeping watch. He decided not to think too hard about the difference. 2 days passed. They built a quiet routine the way two strangers sometimes do when circumstances leave no other choice. Careful, negotiated, full of unspoken agreements. She cooked in the mornings, surprising him with what she could make from the sparse pantry. He worked on the cabin during the day, and she sat near whichever room he was in, reading a paperback she'd had in her coat pocket or simply watching the trees. They talked in fragments. Weather, the cabin, small things. Her name, she finally told him on the second evening, was Nora. He told her his. She repeated it once, quietly, like she was deciding whether to trust it. He learned things about her the way you learn things about mountain terrain, not by asking but by paying attention. She was careful with food, eating slowly, like someone trained by scarcity. She was educated. She used precise words and caught his references. She laughed once, unexpectedly, when he dropped an entire shelf he'd been trying to rehang, and the laugh was real and unguarded and gone almost as quickly as it came, like she'd surprised herself with it. He found he wanted to make her do it again. He didn't examine that thought too closely either. The baby moved visibly sometimes. A slow roll beneath the fabric of her shirt that she'd catch with her hand without thinking. This unconscious gesture of protection and tenderness that Elias found himself watching when he thought she wasn't looking. She was further along than he'd first guessed. A month out, maybe less. On the third night, the storm got serious. He saw the headlights first. He was outside, checking that the tarp over the firewood was holding. When he caught them, two pale beams sweeping through the lower tree line, moving slow, deliberate. Not lost. Looking. The road up to the cabin wasn't on any map he'd found, and no one he knew was aware he was here. He stood very still and watched the lights move. They stopped. He went inside. Nora was at the table, and something in his face made her stand up immediately, one hand going to the edge of the table for balance. "Someone's here," he said. Quiet. Flat. The color left her face. "How many?" she asked. The fact that that was her first question told him everything. "One truck. Can't tell yet." He moved to the window, edged the curtain back half an inch. The truck had parked at the bottom of the track, and two figures were getting out. Big men, moving with the unhurried confidence of people who expected no resistance. One of them had something long in his hand. "You need to tell me what I'm dealing with," Elias said. She told him. Fast and flat, the way people tell things they've been holding back for too long. A husband. Not a good one. Men who worked for him. The kind of man who owned things and didn't distinguish much between his property and his people. She'd run when she still could. She'd run toward the mountains because she'd grown up near them and because she thought height and weather and remoteness might do what restraining orders didn't. Elias listened without interrupting. When she finished, he nodded once. "Stay away from the windows," he said. "And stay quiet." "Elias, I've got it." He went out the back. The cold hit him like a wall. Full dark now, temperature well below freezing, sleet coming sideways in the wind. He moved through the trees parallel to the track, keeping low, letting the dark and the noise of the storm cover him. The two men were moving toward the cabin, one with a flashlight, one with the rifle loose at his side like a man who wanted it noticed. Elias didn't have a rifle. He had a hatchet on his belt and 3 years of very few reasons left to be careful about himself. He came around behind the man with the flashlight first. What followed was not graceful. It was fast and ugly and entirely functional, the kind of violence that doesn't look like the movies, that ends before the other party fully understands it has begun. The man with the flashlight went down hard. The second man turned, raised the rifle, and then Elias was already inside his reach, and the rifle became a problem for the ground. 2 minutes, maybe less. The sleet kept coming. He zip-tied both men to the truck's front bumper using ties from his toolbox, the large industrial ones he used for bundling lumber, and took the rifle and the keys and the flashlight. His knuckles were bleeding where they'd caught a tooth. His shoulder hurt where it hadn't hurt since an old injury that he generally tried not to remember. He went back inside. Nora was standing in the middle of the room, gripping the back of the chair, breathing in a way that was not entirely about fear. "They're dealt with," he said. "They're not hurt, but they're not going anywhere either." She nodded, and then her face changed. Her hand tightened on the chair. "Elias," she said, "I think it's time." He looked at her. "For what?" She looked back at him with an expression that was somehow both terrified and faintly amused. "The baby," she said. He boiled water. He found clean towels. He remembered things from a first aid course he'd taken 15 years ago and a night he'd spent, once in a hospital waiting room that he generally refused to think about. His hands, which had been steady his entire life, were steady now too, steadier somehow than the rest of him. Nora was extraordinary. That was the only word for it. She breathed through the contractions with a fierce, focused quiet, and when she needed to make noise, she made it without apology, and when she needed to grip his hand, she gripped it hard enough that he felt it for days afterward. He talked to her, low and even nothing important, just the sound of a voice saying, "You're doing fine. I've got you, stay with me," and she stayed with him. The baby came at 2:17 in the morning. Small, red, absolutely furious about everything. Elias held it, held her, he realized a girl, and the world went very quiet in a way it hadn't been quiet in 3 years. She was so small, so complete, so entirely new, with no grief in her yet, no loss, no nothing. Just life, loud and urgent and already demanding more of it. His eyes burned. He didn't let the tears fall. Or maybe he did. He wasn't sure. Nora was watching him from the bed, exhausted past the edges of exhaustion, and when he brought the baby to her, she held her against her chest and closed her eyes, and the sound she made was not a word at all. After a long time, she looked up at him. "Her name is Clara," she said. He nodded, sat on the edge of the bed, didn't move away. "I had a daughter," he said. It was the first time he'd said it out loud to anyone in a very long time. "She was 4. There was an accident. Her and her mother both." Nora didn't say she was sorry. She just reached out and put her hand over the hand with the ring, and left it there. He didn't move away from that either. Dawn came the way it always does on the mountain, slowly, then all at once. The sleet had stopped somewhere in the small hours. The sky above the ridge was the pale, washed blue of a world that had decided to start over. The two men outside were cold and unhappy and very cooperative when Elias called the county sheriff and explained the situation in the briefest possible terms. The sheriff's deputy arrived by 9. There were phone calls. There were questions. There was, eventually, the particular silence that follows when things have been handled correctly, if not easily. The cabin was still broken. One wall needed reframing. The east window didn't seal right. The porch still had 2 boards that needed replacing, and the kitchen shelf he dropped was still on the floor where it had made Nora laugh. He picked it up. She was sitting in the chair by the stove again, Clara against her chest, both of them drifting in and out of sleep in the way of people who have been through something enormous and come out the other side into an exhaustion that feels almost like peace. The morning light came through the west window and settled over them like something deliberate. Elias rehung the shelf. Then he put a pot of coffee on. Then he went to the front door and opened it. Not to go out, not to let the cold in, just opened it and stood there for a moment looking at the mountain, at the trees, at the track winding down through the pines toward a world that had always felt too loud and too close and too full of things he couldn't fix. He thought about the photograph still sitting face down on the dresser. He went and picked it up, looked at it for a long time, set it back down, face up this time. Behind him, Clara made a small sound. Then Nora's voice, soft, "Elias, coffee smells good." He went back to the kitchen, poured 2 cups, sat down at the table across from them. Outside, a bird, the first he'd heard since arriving, started up somewhere in the high pines, a single repeating note, small and clear and patient. He didn't close the door.